In light of recent events concerning possible restrictions on the rights of Ukrainian men in the territory of the European Union, as well as the remote possibility of Ukrainian men returning to Ukraine. In order to send them to the front, I decided to prepare for you a list of 5 countries outside the European Union where Ukrainians can move and settle down to build their lives. Once again, you can write in the comments how many times in a row you might have to move. And I have prepared a brief overview of 5 countries and the following criteria. Average and median salary, which is extremely important, conditions for doing business and for self-employed people, that is, for those who work, for example, in the IT sector or in marketing, or just have an online job. The possibility of long-term stay, which is no less important, obtaining a residence permit, permanent residence, a passport, and so on, and of course, renting housing. These are the points that you specifically ask about every time we discuss any information about possible relocations. So let's figure this out now and talk about this top 5 list. Subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, be sure to give it a like and share it with your friends. Thank you all for your support. And of course, I will read all your comments, so be sure to write them. And the first country I decided to look at is Albania. In fact, as of 2026, if you look, for example, at the salary, the minimum wage in Albania is 517 euros per month. Of course, they don't have the euro, they have their local currency, the lek. Converted to euros, it's 517 euros, that's not much, and it's one of the lowest minimum wages in Europe. Let me remind you again, the country isn't in the European Union. In fact, you can find a job on the local market, but Albania is best suited for people who work remotely or have a business, for example, in Ukraine, without any problems. You can live, let's say, in Albania, because on average, for a good life, one person needs about 1,000 euros per month. If we look at, for example, expenses for a family, it could be 1,500, 1,000, and so on. This covers all basic needs and allows you to live a little better than the average person. And Albania, by the way, has become extremely popular among Ukrainians over the past year, especially those who are now moving from European Union countries. Even among my acquaintances, there are many people who have chosen Albania. That's it. As I already mentioned, it's best suited for those who work remotely. And they have a digital nomad visa, which is specifically for those who have foreign clients and come to live in Albania. To get it, you need to have a minimum income of 9,800 euros per year. That's about 820 euros per month, which is a very low requirement for the IT sector. For the first year, there is zero income tax on foreign income, and the cost of obtaining such a visa is around 100 euros. The permit is issued for 1 year with the possibility of extension for up to 5 years. If we are talking about long-term stay, after 5 years of living in Albania, you can obtain permanent residency. After 7 years, you can obtain citizenship. The path is quite straightforward. You can get this visa, extend it up to 5 years, then obtain permanent residency, and then get a passport. So everything is clear, open, and transparent. If you look at rentals, it all depends on the specific city. But on average, you can rent good quality housing for 300, 400, or 500 euros. Housing where a whole family can live. So Albania is the first option. Let's move on to the next one. The second is also a country on the Balkan Peninsula, but this time it's Montenegro. Montenegro is more expensive than Albania, but the standard of living in Montenegro is also higher. Montenegro has introduced a 2-tier minimum wage. 670 euros per month is for positions with up to a secondary education, and 800 euros per month is for those with higher education. And these are already take-home payments, that is net, money that you can actually use. The sectors most in demand in Montenegro are tourism, hospitality, IT, and marketing. There is steady demand and steady work in hospitality and tourism, especially during the summer season. for the IT sector, as always, at any time. About the average salary. The average net salary is about 1,000 euros per month. That's it. And 1,000 euros is already better than in Albania. Remember, in Albania, it's around 600 to 700 euros next. About business, you can register a company. This is done very quickly in 5 to 10 days. Low taxes. That's it. And the company director automatically gets the right to obtain a residence permit for themselves and their entire family. So this is also a good option for entrepreneurs, for long-term stay. You get a residence permit, for example, through a company for 1 year with annual renewal. You can also get a residence permit through purchasing real estate, but the entry threshold there is much higher, well over 200,000 euros. If you buy real estate, you can get a long-term residence permit. That's it. You can get citizenship after 10 years. So this option can also be considered. Regarding rent, if we look at the capital, on average from 350 to 500 euros per month, that's it. If we look at the coast, of course, during the season it can be 600, 700 or even 1,000 euros. When it's the low season, when there are no tourists, the prices are much lower. That's it. One of the biggest downsides of Montenegro, even according to official reports, is corruption and organized crime. And this problem is openly acknowledged even during the negotiations for joining the European Union. That's it. Next, the third option is Georgia. Here probably there's also no need to say much about the fact that there are already a huge number of Ukrainians in Georgia today. Georgia is a great option for those who are also engaged in entrepreneurial activities, because after opening the local equivalent of our sole proprietorship, right? Yes. Taxes for small businesses are 1% of turnover. That's all you pay. So it's a great option for living in Georgia. You can stay there for a whole year. After that, you can just leave for another country and come back, and your stay period resets. According to information from open sources, about the average salary in Georgia is about $850 per month. And actually, this salary is also constantly increasing. So it's a great option for those who, for example, don't want to bother with learning the language. Right? Because we all understand which language, in most cases, Georgians also understand, just like Ukrainians do. So, about long-term stay. You can stay for 1 year without a visa. After that, as I already said, you can either enter or leave and stay there again. You can also get a residence permit through business, real estate, or official employment. That's it. So you can also consider this. About rent. If we look at Tbilisi, that is the capital, the average rent for good options is from $600 to $900 per month. If we look at Batumi, right, it's from $300 to $500. Other small towns, unknown to most of us, right, that's from $200 to $350 per month. For a comfortable life, for example, in the capital, that is in Tbilisi, you need from about $1,200 to $1,500. That's to cover all your expenses. For a family of 3 or 4 people, it will be around $2,000. So it's also a great option for those who have remote jobs or who are ready to take a risk and start their own business. That's it. As for the downside, the main disadvantage of Georgia is that if you work remotely, right, you have foreign clients. It's a great option. If you try to find a decent job within the country, you might run into some problems. That's because there's competition, again, with the locals. And also, another big downside is that the country had a pro-European position and was aiming to join the European Union. But let's remember that not so long ago they gave up on that. And as of today, it's not clear which direction they will move in, whether towards Europe or towards Russia. Next. The next country is, of course, Canada. This is a country you've also written about more than once. Also, if we look at Canada, in light of recent events, Canada is now considering introducing visa-free entry for Ukrainian citizens, which will greatly simplify moving to this country. In fact, you just need to buy a plane ticket and you can fly there. Plus, Canada is the kind of country where most likely everyone has some friends or acquaintances who have already moved there. Plus, Canada has the largest diaspora in the world, with about 1.4 million Canadians of Ukrainian descent. And let's remember that the strongest Ukrainian diaspora in the world is there. As for the minimum wage, in Canadian dollars, it's 17.75 per hour, which is almost $13 in regular US dollars. The minimum wage depends on the region, but it's more or less the same everywhere. Next, Ukrainians can stay there and work without any restrictions because Canada is continuing its temporary protection programs for Ukrainians. The average monthly salary in Canada is about $3,900. That's in US dollars. In Canadian dollars, it's 5,400. Odd. So moving on. About work, there are plenty of jobs. Housing is of course more expensive, but the salary covers all of that more than enough. And if you work, or even if you already know at least some basic English, it will be much easier to find a job. And Canada is the kind of country where you can easily find both manual jobs and white-collar jobs, so there are no problems at all. Canada is a country of immigrants, and we understand that Canada is always open to everyone. Again, though, not everyone is suited to the climate that Canada has. And even among my acquaintances, there are many people who first went to Canada and then returned back to Europe. But right now we're considering the scenario where, for example, Europe becomes an unsuitable option for Ukrainians. That's it. For long-term stay. Now, everything has been extended exactly the same way as in Europe for Ukrainians who, for example, have temporary protection there until March 2027. That's it. And then you can extend your stay for another 3 years. That's it. And now different options are being considered for Ukrainians to obtain permanent residency, yes, and then build their lives there. Rent, I think, and some expenses. Rent, there's not even any point in considering it because the minimum and average salary simply covers all these expenses, and Canada is one of those countries where you can actually live, not just survive. Even if you don't work remotely, you're not an entrepreneur at heart, and you just want to work somewhere at a factory or on some construction site or at some auto repair shop, and you don't want anyone bothering you. Just honestly work with your hands, earn an honest living, and live honestly. Canada is a great option. And another option that a lot of Ukrainians in Europe are thinking about right now is Argentina. Why? Because there's this thing that you can get their passport in just 2 years. Probably there's just no faster way to get another country's passport, honestly. Plus, in Argentina, let me remind you, they just recently got a new president, and they're going through some really radical changes right now. Plus, this country is as far away as possible from today's centers of military conflict, meaning from Europe and the Middle East. A country that's located somewhere at the edge of the world. That's it, thank you. Everything needs to be calculated in dollars, not in their local currency, the peso, because inflation is very high right now. The minimum wage is about $323 per month, that's it. The key point, if you are currently earning in dollars or euros, and if you are ready to move to Argentina, this is a great option. Because with the money you earn in Europe, for example, if it's enough for you in Europe, then if you go to Argentina with that same amount, you'll be able to afford much more with that money. And your standard of living will just radically change. Srednja. The average monthly salary in Argentina is about $800. That's it. We probably won't break it down by sectors. As for business, there is a free humanitarian visa for Ukrainians for 3 years, and with it, you get the right to live and work. For freelancers and those who work remotely, this is perfect. Because you can earn, as I already said, in foreign currency, spend in the local one, and inflation won't affect you at all. It's possible to open a company, but you need local legal support due to the specifics of the legislation. But again, even in any European country, if you need to open a company, you turn to local specialists, so I don't see any problems with this at all. Regarding rent, if we look at the capital, for example, Buenos Aires, and consider a good, prosperous neighborhood, the rent will average from $700 to $1,000 per month if paid in dollars. There is one downside. The downside is that, as of today, since Milei became president, there is a certain economic instability. And here it's best to earn in foreign currency. That is, to have earnings somewhere in Europe and work remotely while living in Argentina. Because this economic stability, as of today, simply doesn't exist. On the contrary, there is economic instability, for example, with inflation. Inflation, although it has slowed down, still remains. And also, if you want to work in the local market, Spanish is very, very important, not only for work, but also in general for integrating into this market. However, knowledge of English is also quite high. Власне, actually, these countries that we are considering, we see that the employment situation in their local job markets is much worse than in the European Union. But there are far fewer restrictions and many more opportunities for entrepreneurs or for starting a business. So once again, we are considering these countries exclusively as a backup option in case we need to move somewhere outside Europe. I didn't specifically consider Asia in this episode because there are also many wonderful countries in Asia where Ukrainians can move and where Ukrainians will feel very, very comfortable. So, if you're interested in me covering Asian countries as well, be sure to write in the comments and I'll definitely do that for you. What do you think about this? Write in the comments. Let me know if you've ever thought about where to move if something goes wrong in Europe. Write in the comments. It will be very interesting to read your opinion. Thank you all. See you next time.